So now it's time to wrap it all up. Let's talk about all these pieces put together. The goal here is to reflect on the instructional practices, not just with me here on these videos, but with peers as well. And to put this in terms of the DBI framework and the explicit instruction checklist. So let's begin by talking about the DBI framework. I have mentioned many times now how explicit instruction is related to the DBI framework. So now it's your turn to figure out how is this related to the DBI framework? Not to figure it out, but actually just to state it. So your task right now is to write out the way in which you think explicit instruction relates to the DBI framework. So this is a good opportunity to reflect on everything I've said about that, to see whether or not it still makes sense to you. So go ahead and do it, and I'll tell you what I think. But don't watch that part first. Think about it first. Okay, so here's what I think. Remember that explicit instruction is an adaptation that you're going to use when students don't respond. So if you look at your progress monitoring data and students aren't responding, then you're going to look at diagnostic assessment data. And when you see that students are confused about concepts or aren't able to do things that you thought you taught, you're probably going to think to yourself, maybe there's something about the way I'm teaching that isn't making students successful. And at that point, you need to decide if you can increase explicitness to improve students' response. And that's where you then need to decide what parts of explicit instruction are you going to improve, because you can't do everything at once. So how's that? Did you come up with the same thing I did? I hope it was at least similar in some way. Now, you've learned this DBI framework, and you've also learned this model of explicit instruction. This is a last chance to think it all through. Now that you know all of the pieces, it's a good activity to kind of commit them to memory. Why? Because when you're planning lessons, you can keep all of these things in mind. You can think to yourself, do I have the stuff that's here and here and here? Do I have the stuff that goes here and here and here? There are two things under here, and 2 things under here, and 3 down here. So make sure you get all those pieces in there so that when you are planning your own lesson, you have a cognitive framework for it. So pause the video, think about these pieces, and then come back together. I assume you put all that together. And the final thing we're going to ask you to do is now to reflect on all of the pieces put together. You know the checklist. We've talked about it a million times. Not a million times. A lot of times. So now, can you put all the pieces together? What do you remember about creating objectives, modeling, and practice? What do you remember about how to elicit responses and so on? So take a minute to think to yourself, what are the pieces of the checklist? What are the actual expectations for doing each of these things well? As you know, there's some kind of sub-checklists under these, and you can include elements from each of those, even though they aren't on kind of the summary checklist, and that's fine to do as well. This gives you an opportunity to think one more time about how all the checklist fits together. And of course, when you're done with that, there's a big copy of all the pieces of the checklist in your workbook, so you'll be able to refer to it going forward. So you always have that with you. But you also have in your mind as you're planning, and the workbook is elsewhere, and you don't have access to these modules to look it up on your computer, you always have this to look back at. So now that you know about the checklist, well, go pause and do the checklist. Think about all those parts, and then we'll come back together and we're going to close things up. To close, we're going to ask you to talk with a peer. You've seen probably enough of me at this point, and I appreciate you sticking with me through all of this. Now, you already have your video from part 3 of the lesson. You're going to now post that video and provide context for the lesson. And you and your peers are going to evaluate different lessons using the checklist. Figure out what the objective is, and then identify the modeling, the practices, and supporting practices. Provide feedback to peers about the explicitness of the instruction. Where do you see the most evidence of explicitness, and what are areas in which a peer could actually improve? You're also going to get feedback, and the exciting thing here is that once you've gotten some feedback from peers, you can think about what's the next thing you need to do yourself. So we want you to finish by setting some goals. What's the next thing you're going to do in your learning about explicit instruction? And finally, provide some supportive feedback, not supporting practice, supportive feedback to your peers about the goals they've set to encourage them to go forward and make their instruction maximally explicit for students. And the last thing I have to say is goodbye and good luck. I've enjoyed spending all of this time with you on these modules. I hope you've enjoyed it with me. We've done a lot of stuff together. You've watched lots of video of me teaching. I filmed lots of video of me teaching this to you. And I hope that you've enjoyed the experience of learning about explicit instruction in the way that we've described here. We hope that this will help you improve your practice and become an effective practitioner who uses explicit instruction in a strategic way to maximize student success. So go forth and be explicit in your teaching and hope for student success. Thanks again.